quite rightly, when boards are deciding, when companies are deciding which non-exec directors are going to sit on their boards, they go through a lot of due diligence to make sure they've got the right person. But it's a two-way street, I think. Equally, it works well the other days. If you're a non-exec director thinking about which organisation should I join, there should be due diligence that you carry out on those organisations. Does it fit with your skill set, culture, etc.? Deanna, you're on a few boards, 3 boards, Tesco Bank, AXA, and most recently WorldPay. What were the sort of decision-making that you went through to decide, should I join this board or not?
Well, I think the first thing that you look at is, do you want a portfolio, and if so, how broad? So it is often really a great thing for a sitting executive to have one other non-executive role on another board, because it can be a real learning experience for them, gives an opportunity to look at differences. In that case, though, you really have to realize you have a full-time executive role, and probably a company that's going through a lot of challenges, a lot of change, a lot of time, a lot of turmoil is probably not one that you would want to select just for the sheer timing of it. When you then go into the next point, as I did, and said, okay, I'm going from an executive into a portfolio role, then I looked at what would I like to round out that portfolio. So in my case, I wanted to select both financial services, but also other industries, as I described in my case, B2C industries, or B2B, where C matters. And the point in that would be retail, which I did on Tesco, the PLC, as well as Tesco Bank. And in Tesco Bank particularly, I was interested in the convergence that's happening of payments and purchasing. And so that's why I chose a supermarket bank. In the area of AXA, I really wanted to explore insurance, which was complementary to my banking skills, but insurance at a global, big level, and with a really strong global insurer, and that was AXA. And in the chance of WorldPay, in the case of WorldPay, what was really interesting there is I have an advisory business on the West Coast of the US, where I work with a number of CEOs of these disruptive technologies in a variety of different industries. And in that one, WorldPay, because it had just IPO'd, and was just coming out from a private into a public governance side, that had big interest for me. So in my case, it was all tailored to what I wanted to accomplish with a portfolio. And that's what I would recommend to anybody who is looking at a board. What is it that you want to achieve with your portfolio, and how does this organization fit within that context first?
I guess otherwise you need to question why you're there. You know, if you're just being put on the board because they want you to wave things through and that doesn't fit with what you're looking for from the board, that's probably not right for you. If they want somebody who looks different maybe from the other non-exec directors that are on the board, that's probably going to fit with what you're there for. So you can bring challenge, you can bring a different experience and expertise.
Well, because you're there as a fiduciary, and again, so we could talk about 2 different kinds of boards here. We can talk about pure advisory, where you're just giving advice and counsel, and you're non-fiduciary. The ones we're talking about here is where you're a fiduciary. You can't be waving things through. So clearly, it is incumbent on you to be independent and to basically be supportive, but also challenging. And ideally, what you're trying to do is deliver that in a way that causes the executive to think, causes the executive to reach conclusions. Because again, you're not in an executive demanding role. You're in one of where you're providing counsel. And so understanding that nuance and difference, I often use the analogy, it's the difference between being a parent and being a grandparent. You know, as a parent, you're basically calling all the shots, you're raising that child. At the end of the day, your name is on the line. As a grandparent, you're there giving advice and counsel, you weigh in on key issues, but you are there to step in if something really serious needs to happen. So I think that this is a real opportunity of how you look at your role as a NED.
Deanna touched on it just then, Stephen, about looking at what's coming out from the regulator's office, because I guess that might decide, depending on what's happening in the risk outlook for the year, how much you want to be involved with an organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. Every April, the FCA will come out with their risk outlook, what are the key issues on their agenda. Usually they're quite high level, but occasionally they will really zoom in on something and you think, oh, okay, that's something that's really, that they're really interested in at the moment. A good example of that is legacy business, for example. For the last few years, the FCA, we all may remember the PR disaster the FCA had a couple of years ago. Well, that was about where they were saying, we're really concerned about how customers are being treated who have been with the same firm for a very long period of time. And so that's something to consider. How long is the business I'm looking at been in business for? How has its business model evolved over the years that it's been going? What does that mean about the risks that might be inherent in its back book? And consequently, what are some of the questions I might want to be thinking about and asking about, both before I become a non-executive of that organisation, to understand their culture and their approach, but also, as you were saying, Deanna, how can I be adding value straight away?
I think Stephen makes a really good point on the regulator. If you're going to go on a regulated board, and if you have relationships with that regulator, at the appropriate time, you can certainly say, what do you think about this board? And how would you see a fit for myself? If you don't have that relationship with the regulator, that's fine. I think what you need to say to the company is, tell me about what the regulator's looking for in your next non-executive directors. And then you can certainly be reading everything, the financial minutes, all those types of informations about that company in and of itself.
So if you were to give, I'm going to ask both of you this, but the single most important piece of advice, I'm a new NED, I've got some companies that I've been thinking about, what should I be really looking for? How do I make sure that this is going to be the right organisation for me? I can start with Stephen and I'll come to Deanna.
I think culture is absolutely critical. In all the work we do with all organisations, what drives what happens is the culture, and that is driven by the rest of the board. So I would be thinking about, from the meetings and conversations I've had with the executive and other non-executive directors as part of the approach that I've taken, is this an organisation that's going in a direction that I want to go in, and my contribution is going to be valued, taken on board, and these are people I can really work with.
So Stephen took mine as well, which is always the case. But
you said you go second, Deanna.
That's exactly right. But I think that coming on from that is this idea of, is it a match? And not meaning that you want to go in and just rubber stamp everything. It means, is this an organization that is in a industry, in a space where I can contribute to? Is it in a point in its development and its strategic time that I can contribute? In my case, my executive career was mostly in high growth and turnaround situations. So to go into a status quo board would not be a good match for me. So you need to look at where the organization is at that point in time. But really, the bottom line is it going to be a match? Are you going to be able to contribute? And are they going to be able to take your advice? I guess I always think about it is, as an advisor, your job is to give an advice, but only advice that is listened to. So they don't have to act on it, but are you heard as a non-executive director? And that is very, very important. And then what is not said, can you see if that is a key risk to what's happening in the business? So all of that means that it really does come back and circles back to the culture point.